Our anime today begins with the faint memory of a star, in which a young girl proceeds to tell us that we are in the kingdom of Midgard and that we were summoned through ancient magic. The goddess, for her part, introduced herself as Nolan and apologized with great regret, since she had the soul of an innocent in the midst of other people's problems. This confuses our protagonist a little bit, since he thinks if he was summoned, it should be because of something great. Nolan clarifies that the Otherworlder summoning randomly selects from countless targets across a multitude of worlds. It rarely affects people who weren't meant to be a target. So in short, the guy is now in great danger, because the difference of magic and strength that exists between World A and B are very different. With anger, the goddess mentions that despite all the risks, the nation activated it under reckless conditions, but thanks to a nearby nation, they managed to do it. Leaving that aside, Nolan is here to provide solutions to any kind of problem, but our protagonist only asks where all the others who were summoned are. The goddess reveals that the proper targets of the spell were safely summoned to the place where the spell was activated, the Holy Cydonia Empire. And even if the right thing to do was to send him back to his world, Nolan mentions that she got so ticked off that she patched things so they could never use that forbidden spell a second time. In other words, our protagonist can never return to his world because of her, and he even had no body since technically he wouldn't have to be here. But not everything was ugly according to the goddess, since he could start a new life in Midgard. This brought the doubt to the young man of why not send him to Cydonia, since the other 3 humans were sent there. The goddess tells him that the Holy Cydonia Empire is a problematic place, and since he was caught up by accident, his treatment there would be rather awful. Nolan feels kind of guilty about all of this, since he can't go back because of her. So at least she took care of giving him her support, as well as sending him to a neighboring nation with her goddess blessing. And knowing that in Japan, video games and fantasy worlds are famous, Nolan offers him a life just like that. Even though he didn't like the idea, the goddess reminds him that he has her super support, so all he has to do is try to will status. After doing so, our protagonist gets a new name, which is Takumi Iruma, a 17-year-old human with no job. This is kind of strange to him, since he used to be a salaryman of 40 years old. However, salarymen don't exist on Midgard, but he can choose between hero and warrior. Between these options, if he wants to aim for an adventuring one, there's swordsman, mage, night thief, and hunter. On the other hand, production jobs include herbalist, alchemist, blacksmith, carpenter, and others. Takumi, not wanting to get into fights, immediately chooses production jobs, and the goddess explains to him that by mastering the first skill, the following ones will be unlocked. Plus, she also gives him a special magic crystal with her blessing, and a nice trip to the continent of Asgard. Once he arrives, Takumi notices his new physical appearance, which is not bad at all, and in his bag he finds a supply of food and some money. In his stats, he can see the blessing of the goddess, so he decides to keep that a secret and never tell anyone about it. One of his skills is Item Box, and he also has magic, so he thinks it would be fun to try, and the first spell he uses is Water Ball, which he acquires just after using it. This led the young man to try out more wind and rock type elemental skills, but since this world is like Minecraft, he first has to find a nearby house or village so as not to spend the night alone. When he finds a nice piece of wood, his appraisal skill informs him the kind of things he can do with it. Being the easiest one, he decides to make a spear with his blacksmith skill, and collects a lot of plants and ingredients he finds nearby. He gets a little carried away and picks a lot, but with his item box, everything is stored quite easily thanks to the goddess. In that moment, a young girl runs towards him and asks for help, since she's being chased by a wild giant rabbit. Without thinking about it, Takumi defends himself with the spear, managing to beat the rabbit with just one blow, though he knows this must be the goddess doing, who feels kind of flattered, but knows his strength did everything. That aside, the system counts that as a combat, so he earns the warrior title level 1 without wanting to. The little girl thanks Takumi and explains that she was just picking medicinal herbs and strayed into the forest. Since she's from a village, Takumi decides to go with her and stores the giant rabbit in his item box, though he realizes he probably showed something he shouldn't to the little girl, whose name is Molly. Now in the kingdom of Cydonia, we see the 3 summoned humans who at that moment did not know where they were. One of the girls, named Akane, just wanted to know where they were, and at that moment, a woman welcomed them all. She tells them that they're on another world, and she needs them as heroes for its salvation. Even though it's a lot to take in, the woman introduces herself as the first empress of this Holy Cydonia Empire, Elizabeth. At that moment, Akane learned the revelation skill that Nolan had granted her, which is in a few words a super powerful intuition that will guide the young woman to the correct answer. After seeing her, Akane knew that the princess was not someone to be trusted, so she would have to be careful with her. Back with our protagonist, he returned the little girl to her home safe and sound. Banga and Martha, Molly's parents, couldn't be more grateful that their little girl was safe, so they offered anything to Takumi, who was more than happy to just spend some time in the village. Bobon, for his part, was the village blacksmith, and he offered him to stay as long as he wanted in Board Village, though unfortunately for him, they had no inns. That's why they give Takumi a piece of land to build his house, and he starts by leveling the ground with his skill, though that shaves away most of his mana, making him feel exhausted. The villagers can notice this, so they ask him to rest while they take care of the rest. After that, in no time, Takumi's house is finally finished, though he wonders if he can change his job. When he sees that it is actually possible, he immediately changes it to Alchemist, and with iron ore, silver ore, and copper ore that he mined with Bobon, he decides to turn them into ingots. Normally that would require a large furnace to melt them in, but this is a fantasy world, so he can finally do alchemy. It is generally composed of 5 techniques: decomposition, extraction, pulverization, then synthesis, and recomposition. He used all of that to finally create an iron ingot, though this skill made him feel tired as well because of the mana consumption. Despite that, Takumi can't help but to feel happy, because he's using magic, so he decides to keep going non-stop. Later, we see Molly visiting his house, but when she enters the place, all she finds is Takumi laying on the floor after passing out from using too much mana. That only earned him a great lecture from Martha, since this kind of magic can't be trained alone. At the end, with a healing potion, he recovers completely and continues his alchemy, and this time, Martha and Molly watch over him so he doesn't go too far like last time. Over time, ingots became easy to make, no matter what material they were made of. Thanks to that, he was able to make utensils and other tools, and his alchemist level skyrocketed to level 32, and blacksmith went to 36. After all, together with Bobon, he worked in the late evening making multiple weapons. This, in addition to having to be a blacksmith's magical assistant, gave him a lot of experience making weapons. Though unfortunately for him, it was easier to level up as a blacksmith than as an alchemist. Later, Takumi went straight to Banga to ask for some potions, as he wanted to examine them so he could make potions with medicinal herbs himself. That's how, after a few odd combinations in his personal pot, the young man ends up with 2 potions that have different colors. Although he did not know why, perhaps he thought it was because of the ingredients, and when he tried some new ones, he found the bad luck that one was totally poisonous, and only thanks to his cure skill did he not lose his life. In turn, as bad luck would have it, a wild animal appeared to fight him, one with skin so tough that not even a knife or spear could pierce its body. With nothing else to do, Takumi was forced to use his Windcutter spell along with Rock Ball, but even this was nothing to the wild boar. And as if he didn't have enough bad luck already, there was a poisonous spider near him, but noticing that it was injured, he knew that it wouldn't hurt him. At the same time, the spider decided to attack the boar for no reason, but only ended up more injured, and Takumi would be next if he didn't do something quickly. So, in a last attempt to save himself, he used alchemy magic to stop the attack since he had a good level in it. Even though he managed to beat the monster, he wasn't the only one injured as the spider from before was greatly injured by the boar. Takumi decides to cure it as a thanks, knowing that the spider was trying to help him. However, the system informs him that he just tamed a wild animal, giving him the option to accept it or not. Of course, the spider's puppy eyes didn't help much to make him say no, so without any other choice, Takumi accepts it. Though he has to give it a name, and goes for Maple, because the pattern on its back looks like a maple leaf. Thanks to their bond, Maple was able to both evolve and heal its damaged leg, so the spider couldn't be happier. Later, the townspeople noticed how Takumi had defeated a giant armored boar, and also that he had a spider on his back. But when he clarifies that he tamed the spider, no one else worried, since a bond like that is enough for it not to attack anyone. Without further ado, all that was left to do was cook the wild boar so that everyone in the village could feast. Finally, the night came where Bobon was glad to have the leather, skin, tusk, and remains of the animal, since they would serve well to make strong armor. Though it would be better to sell the skin in the city when he has to go, as they would pay a good price for it. This reminds Takumi that he doesn't know where the nearest city is, so they tell him that Bolton is the nearest to the village. After that, Takumi goes to play for a bit with his pet, while Bobon and Banga mention how happy they are to have him in the village. Despite that, they know he's not the kind of person to stay in such a small village forever. In another place, we see how a woman kept seeing into the distance, and even the goddess is seeing how Takumi is doing, feeling proud for giving him her blessing. Near Nolan, Another goddess wants to know what she's hoping for from him, because granting him a special body and her blessing, and most importantly, sending him 1 whole year into the past, before the Holy Cydonia Empire activated their summoning spell, is not something a goddess does for nothing. Nolan clarifies there's no particular meaning to that, so she'll just see how far he can go with his skills and ideas. Now we are with Takumi completely immobilized by Maple's webs, something that he evidently protests against, since she can't do something like that to him while he sleeps. The spider apologizes for what she did, but he has been very busy and she gets very bored. Takumi understands better what is happening to her, and recognizes that lately he has only been dedicated to making potions and other things. That is why he apologizes and tells her that he will not work today to play together, something that makes Maple very happy to the point where she starts jumping on him. At that moment, Martha comes into the room to bring him something to eat, but she enters a state of shock when she sees Takumi trapped and at the mercy of the spider. He immediately clarifies that it's a misunderstanding and the spider isn't trying to eat him. Once she hears that, Martha approaches to better observe the spider silk that Maple has created, showing a terrifying look that leaves them scared. Later, she shows off a piece of clothing that she has created to the other women, where she clarifies that she has created it with spider silk, praising Maple for giving them the luxury of doing this. Because Takumi does not know about the subject, they explain to him that spider silk is very valuable, so much so that it is used in luxury items and all the nobles buy it. There, Martha asks Maple to produce a thread with a bit more elasticity, but Takumi tells her that she cannot understand speech. Takumi is surprised that they can hold a conversation and approaches Maple to ask if she doesn't want to play together, but Maple points out that she has work to do. Because of that, Takumi separates himself and agrees to let her have fun. After all, he also has things to do. It's been nearly a month since he came to this village, so he would like to go to a city to study alchemy, but he doesn't know how to say it with how well he has been treated. The next thing he does is visit Bobon so that he can fit him with a light chest plate, as well as some boots that allow him to kick well. Takumi finds it strange since he works as a producer, but Bobon makes him see that no one with a creation job goes through a forest of monsters alone. At that moment, Banga joins them to see how they're doing, as he knows that Takumi is moving on to another city, and for him to grow as a producer, he has to go to a city with a higher demand for materials. Bobon tells him that a trader from Bolton is coming next week, and Banga agrees to talk to him so that he can let him travel on his carriage. Once they decide all this, they set out to finish making his armor, and Takumi thanks them a lot for everything they are doing. Later, Takumi goes to greet Martha, whom he asks what she has in her hands. She explains that they are the innards of a horned rabbit Banga hunted, and they are the most delicious part, but if they are not treated, they can have parasites and diseases, and because they cannot be purified here, then they must be thrown away. After listening to her, he tells her that he can use purification magic, so he does not hesitate to use it to be able to clean the impurities from the entrails. Martha is surprised that he can use light magic, and after thanking him, she advises him not to use that magic in front of other people. There are very few people who can use light magic, so few that those who do make a living from it alone. She doubts anyone here would care, but he better be careful once he's out of the village. A week goes by as Takumi focuses on Board Village's defenses through his magic, having the wish that the villagers can live safely and with all the comforts possible, because he wants to repay them for all they've done for him. After some time, the trader named Papek finally arrives in the village, kind of surprised by how advanced they are compared to before. When he finishes discussing Banga's requests, he tells him about Takumi and introduces him to him afterward. Before leaving, Takumi takes out a potion and lets Banga know that he left 100 of them at home, giving them permission to distribute them when needed. Papek is really interested in that potion and asks him about it, so Takumi tells him that it is a basic healing potion that he made on his own. After that, Papek analyzes it more carefully, but they are interrupted by Martha when it is time to say goodbye. She, along with the others, gives him an ideal piece of clothing for him, which they made so that he would be well presented. This is when Takumi sadly says goodbye to everyone, because he really appreciates what they did for him. Once he's in the carriage, he's very aware that this is the first place in Mildgard he ever lived in. In that moment, he meets Heath, Ryle, and Bogar, a rank C adventuring party known as Lion Fang, the bodyguards for Papek. They are drawn to the bag he is holding, and Takumi calmly tells them that it is his familiar, the killer spider. This makes them surprised that he has tamed something like that, and curiously Ryle gets too close to take a look, but this makes Maple jump on him. While they are distracted by the spider, Papek asks Takumi if he has more stock of the potion from earlier, as he is very interested in buying it. Suddenly they are interrupted when a group of goblins gets in the way, something that the adventurers begin to take care of, eliminating the monsters in a matter of a couple of minutes. Maple thinks Bogar is amazing, she doesn't like Ryle, and Heath is just average. After that, the journey continued without incident, and 3 days later, they arrive at Bolton, Kingdom of Barkula. Everything looked new for Takumi, who headed for the Adventurers Guild along with the 3 members of Lionfang, who were going to report the success of their escort quest. He has to register with the guild in order to stay in the city, and to register Maple as a pet. And even though he would have preferred to register with an Alchemist guild if possible, unfortunately, there isn't one in the city. Despite that, many people use the guild card as identification, or at least that's what the receptionist Hans explained to him. The lower rank card doesn't expire as long as he completes 1 assignment a month, so in the end, he decided to join the Adventurers Guild and register Maple as his familiar. After this, he visits Papek's company to do business with him, and he shows him that he has about 100 potions of each in stock. This leaves Papek delighted, offering to pay him for the basic healing and stamina potions at 10 silver each, and the mana potions at 50 silver each. As soon as he hears this, Takumi gets very excited, because after doing the calculations and the conversion, that would be about 7 million yen, and so he asks him if that is not too high a price. Papek explains to him that since he is not a renowned creator, he would be paying a little less than average. Takumi thinks that this seems too good to him, but he wonders why he is so good if he has just met him. For a moment, he thinks that he may be hiding something from him, although he does not seem the type to deceive people. Suddenly, Papek changes the subject by talking to him about where he can live, because if he wants to establish himself as a creator, he recommends that he lives in a residence with a workshop. Takumi immediately rejects the idea since he can't afford to buy a house, but Papek explains that if he'll settle for a rented one, he can show him one right away. Before he can respond, he rings a bell to call his employee Thomas to take him to that house. But when Takumi finally sees what he recommends, he is shocked since it turns out to be a whole mansion. Thomas informs him that the monthly rent is 1 gold and 50 silver per month, something that Takumi thinks is quite good since he can afford it if he sells the potions. And after confirming that there is nothing wrong with it and that Maple likes it, he accepts this great offer. After this, he walks with Thomas, who tells him that he will go fill out the papers so he can move tomorrow, but suddenly Takumi is distracted by an odd smell. Thomas asks him if it bothers him, and Takumi admits that it does, as it is something he has noticed since he arrived in the city. Thomas explains that it is the sewers, and that the nobles use magical purifying devices to treat the sewage from their mansions, but it is not enough. Magic purifying devices have to be excavated from dungeons or ancient ruins, so they're too expensive, and they don't purify the sewers at all. Some priests are hired to purify them periodically, but that doesn't solve the issue completely. The next day, Takumi and Maple finally move into their new home. Here, he decides to handle repairing the walls at a later point and focuses on something more important. He mixes quartz into the clay he purchased from the Papek company, uses magic to shape it. Once it's dried out, he adds heat by adjusting the temperature and shortens the time it needs to bake by using space-time magic. Finally, he strengthens it and sets the shape along with a few final steps, all this process making him go up a few levels in the skills he is using. After finishing, he doesn't hesitate to take a good amount of mana potions, as it turns out to be more exhausting than he thought. Despite that, he accepts that it is totally worth it. This because he was finally able to create his toilet, something he wouldn't change for anything in the world. Suddenly, he hears a scream coming from the entrance, and when he looks out to see what it is, what he finds is poor Papek trapped by Maple's spider webs. She explains that she was just receiving him, but Takumi scolds her, since that is something only the kids from the village would enjoy. To his surprise, Papek begins to feel in heaven because of the incredible texture of the silk, something that leaves Takumi speechless. After he is released, Papek asks him not to worry and to show him where the restroom is. But a few seconds after entering, he asks him what kind of bathroom this is. Takumi explains that it is a toilet, which has a built-in magical device, which purifies everything when one does their business and divides it into clean water and inorganic matter. When Papek hears him mention purification, he asks if he can use light magic. This takes Takumi by surprise, as he remembers well the advice Martha gave him about keeping that kind of magic hidden. Having no other choice, he asks him to please keep this a secret. Papek seriously accepts his request, but asks him if he could create 100 more like these, showing genuine interest in this. At first, Takumi finds it strange that he wants 100 toilets, but he replies that if he gets the materials, he thinks he can do it. Papek thanks him enthusiastically, and now focuses on the fact that he will need manpower to do this great task. Takumi agrees with this, even planning to hire someone to help him. After listening to him, Papek recommends slave contracts. Considering his talents and aptitude, the house and his escort should be run by slaves who will not reveal his secrets thanks to contract magic. He is able to use light magic, which means he is a divine chosen by God, or so the Holy Cydonia Empire, leader of the Divine Light, claims. The Church of the Divine Light welcomes light magic users and makes huge profits using healing, so they will not look kindly on the spread of this toilet with purifying magic. For that reason, Takumi asks him if it will be safe to make them, and Popek answers that he has already thought of how to gain support for that, but they will not be able to make his identity public. And because of that, he should sign a contract with a slave, but Takumi clarifies that he would prefer not to do it, since it is a word with bad connotations for him. So much so that he prefers to do it alone than to have a slave, something that Popek does not agree with since it would be impossible for him to continue like that. Suddenly, Takumi's guild card starts to glow, and upon checking it, he sees that there is a message. He is informed that the Adventurers Guild requires that, within a month, he completes a quest of the appropriate level, and although they know that he will be busy, he must approach the guild before the deadline. With this order in mind, Takumi understands that he really needs manpower. Popek decides to take him to the Mulan Company, the most reliable of Bolton's slave trader companies. When he reaches the entrance, he asks him to wait for him a moment, but Takumi goes a little further to admire the beautiful landscape ahead. That's when he notices a girl who stands out quite a bit among the flower petals flying through the air, but to his surprise, she asks him to go home. The elf woman tells Takumi that this is not a place for a child like him, something he wasn't expecting at all. Despite this warning, he gets to the meeting room with Popek, where he's able to meet the owner of the trading company, Mulan. Popek tells her that Takumi is reluctant to make use of a slave contract, and that's because it's something that just wasn't done in the land he was born in. Mulan mentions that it's true that forming a contract with a slave would bound them to his service, but here in the kingdom of Barkula at least, slaves' rights are protected. The owner pledges to honor the slave's general rights and provide food, clothing, and shelter, and both parties are forbidden from causing life-threatening harm to one another. The slave is prohibited from sharing information about their owner to others, and this makes Takumi realize that it's different than he thought. After this, Mulan explains the common types of contracts. Those who become slaves due to debt, regardless of reason, form a contract that lasts until they repay their debts, and criminals can accept a contract in order to reform and secure a means to earn a living. Prisoners of war can accept a contract to earn a place to live, and there are also contracts formed with those attacked and captured by thieves who illegally forced them into slavery. Popek comments that Takumi would prefer to have one of the war slaves since they cannot be freed without their master's permission, and the reason is that he's a producer with skill and talent that no one could mimic. Takumi adds that he would like to focus on his work as much as possible, but he also has to fulfill quests from the Adventurers Guild, and he's currently struggling to handle his daily affairs, so he'd like to have someone who can manage the mansion he's currently living in. He also has to keep his job a secret, and there may be some altercations, plus he may go to dangerous places to search for materials, so if there was someone who could accompany him and protect him, that would be best. With this in mind, Mulan interprets that he requires 2 slaves, and after a while she introduces him to the first one, Maria. She was kidnapped by bandits when she was very young and has no family left, but they've trained in reading, writing, calculations, and general housekeeping. Once Takumi confirms that she's capable of handling everything, he's seemingly relieved, since he figured someone as cute as her would have plenty of takers. This quickly gets her really flustered, so she clarifies that she can't sleep with him or anything like that, something he immediately accepts, as he wasn't even thinking about it. Despite everything going smoothly, Mulan tells him that they unfortunately don't have war slaves right now, though when Maria hears this, she reminds her that they still have Sophia. Mulan makes her leave, refusing to introduce her since she doesn't meet the requirements, but Takumi insists on meeting her, thinking that his intuition skill is telling him to do so. When they get to the room, Takumi is surprised to see who it is, since it's the elf he met outside earlier. Mulan explains that Sophia, 50 years ago, was captured during the war between the Kingdom of Yugur and the Kingdom of Triaria, and her age is because Yugur was a nation of elves. For various reasons, she has not formed a contract with anyone so far, because she has a large scar on her left ear, and her right hand and left leg have impaired movement. It's not so impaired as to cause issues with her daily life, but she also had the elemental magic and sprite magic unique to elves sealed away, which means she was likely placed under some kind of curse, and these are fatal flaws for a main combatant. Despite this, Takumi asks Mulan to let him speak alone with her for a bit, and she gladly accepts. When the two of them are alone, Sophia clarifies one more time that she won't be of any use to him, for the reasons he just heard. Suddenly, Takumi asks her for permission and just holds her face, since, even if he's not a fan of peeking at others' status, he doesn't have a choice. When he does that, he realizes that this woman is crazy strong, and he knows that if he's able to heal the impairment in her limbs and dispel the curse, then she'll actually be a great fighting asset. Seconds after that, Mulan enters the room, and Takumi doesn't hesitate to tell her that he wants to form a contract with Sophia, who once again reminds him she can't fight. However, he says that he just needs to do something about the reason behind that. Mulan asks him if he's planning to do something about the issues that have shackled her for over 50 years, and Takumi assures her that he will, since he's almost at the level he needs. Hearing that makes Mulan laugh with joy, and she gladly accepts to leave Sophia in his hands. Sophia accepts all of this, and when they finish with all the paperwork, Maria approaches Takumi and thanks him for contracting Sophia along with her. At that moment, Mulan then decides to cast the magic spell as proof of the contract, officially establishing the bond between the two of them and Takumi. Maria is really kind towards him, and Sophia remains polite, telling him that she's at his service. Later that day, the three of them get to his mansion, where Takumi is welcomed by Maple, who jumps right at him. Sophia is alarmed by this, but he explains to them that she is his familiar and introduces her as Maple. After that, Takumi shows them their rooms, and because of how big they are, they don't think they can accept so much luxury from him. He explains to them that the mansion has many rooms, so he would do them a favor if they use them, and that they also have a huge bathtub, so they can use it whenever they want after unpacking. Sophia asks him to use it first, but Takumi tells her that he doesn't have a set time to take his bath. Plus, the bath uses a magical device to constantly keep it clean, so it doesn't matter who uses it first. Taking that into account, the two girls use the bathtub to have a nice, warm bath. Here, Maria comments that she thought Mulan would never let her go, since she's never given a customer her agreement before, no matter how much money she was offered for her. Yet, Mulan has acknowledged Takumi, so she's glad he seems like a kind person. After hearing her, Sophia mentions that she caught a glance of the contract Mulan prepared at the trading company, and most of Takumi's entries were blank, even his birthplace and lineage. If he's concealing that much, then there are either some special circumstances at work, or sharing more would bring trouble. Later that day, Takumi surprises the two of them with dinner ready, something that shocks Maria, since that's her job, which makes her feel like just a toilet in clothing or even lower than that. Takumi clarifies that he only did it because it's the first day, but she can take care of that tomorrow. Once he manages to make her calm down, Sophia asks him if he's having them sit with him for meals, since that would be considered rude. Takumi says that he doesn't want to do everything separate just because they're serving him, so even if they're hesitant, he'd be happy if they went along with it. He is also not used to being called master, so he wants them to use his name. Sophia asks him if that is an order, and he answers that although it is not something serious enough to make it an order, he does prefer it that way. Maria readily agrees to call him by his name, and after that, the three of them sit down at the table to eat. Later, Takumi meets Popek at his company, where he gives him what he asked for, having made sure to seal it well, but still advises him to be careful when handling it. After that, when Takumi is walking down the street, he notices a church nearby, so he decides to take a look inside, finding a statue of Lady Nolan. The next thing he does is thank her for all her blessings, and just then, he remembers the Holy Empire of Cydonia controls the religion of this country, so he wonders why she was bad-mouthing it. Suddenly, she herself clarifies she's not a part of it, and then greets him casually. Takumi just then realizes that he's somewhere else, and Nolan explains that he offered her his prayer, so she called him up nice and quick. She then explains that she has nothing to do with Cydonia and their Church of Divine Light. There are two religions in this world, the Church of Creation and the Church of Divine Light. The Church of Creation has always worshipped Lady Nolan from the start, but the Church of Divine Light was created later, along with its god that doesn't exist. After its founding, the Holy Empire of Cydonia used forceful means to rapidly spread the influence of the Church of Divine Light, and even if they oppose the Church of Creation, Lady Nolan doesn't interfere in all the petty affairs of humanity. So, as a result, Cydonia was able to activate their Otherworlder summoning spell, which got him involved even if he wasn't a target. That's when Nolan warns him that, while her blessing will last forever, as he expands his world, the part of the blessing that helped him grow and meet people will come undone. To make it simple, his tutorial for beginners is nearly over, and he'll find himself hitting walls when it would have been easier before, and he also might encounter people with ill intent who would do him harm. This surprises Takumi, since up until now, he has encountered only good people, and it was all thanks to Nolan's blessing. Because of this, Nolan clarifies that when it comes to an end, Everything's up to him entirely, so that means it's up to him how events play from now on. In a change of scene, we're now in the Holy Empire of Cydonia, 1 year in the future, since this is the time when the people who were targets of the summoning spell were brought. Here, the king of Cydonia asks how everything's going with the heroes they summoned, and one of his men answers that, thanks to Elizabeth, everything's going well, and they have agreed to try aiding them. After this, we see a few of the people summoned training with great effort, and between them, we meet Akira and Yamato. Yamato is having a hard time with the sword, and he remembers that he once lost to a first year on karate. With that memory in mind, he's able to remain motivated to keep fighting with all his strength. On the other hand, Akane avoids joining them, since she doesn't like violence. Hearing that, Elizabeth approaches her to clarify it's not violence, but the strength needed to save their world. After that, Akira asks her not to worry, since he'll protect her no matter what. Akane remains silent, but she knows that Elizabeth is really dangerous. Back to the present, Takumi returns home after having obtained that package from Papek, but when he enters, he accidentally trips, and that object falls to the floor. As soon as he sees that Sophia is about to pick it up, he uses the box of objects to make it disappear and prevent her from doing so. Then he tells them both that he is going to lock himself in the workshop for a while so they can have dinner without him. At that moment, Sophia remains thoughtful, because that package she saw before was a magic wrapper, and this makes her wonder what it is that he is hiding. Because of this, she later goes to his workshop to peel through the door and see what he's doing. Takumi is busy doing cuts on his arm with a sword covered in some kind of poison, and he then uses heal on them, making them disappear. While he does that, he mentions that Maria was really cruel, acting in a suspicious way. Hearing that, Sophia suddenly enters the room to quickly approach him, but due to her impairment, she trips and falls on him. Not caring about it, she immediately asks him to tell her what he's planning to do to Maria, but before giving him a warning, she falls unconscious. Takumi can see that she's suffering extreme exhaustion due to a light wound on her left hand, so he decides to heal her, something that is quite difficult for him despite how small it is, which makes him think it's because of the curse. Still, he stands firm and is able to heal her, and that makes his light magic level up. Once he gets her settled in bed, Maria explains that if Sophia gets too excited or moves around too much, she ends up exhausted. Takumi mentions that it's likely due to the curse on her, so he decides to use Dispel magic on her, using extra heal magic on top of that. That combination manages to cure the ear that had a wound, and when he's done, he tells Maria that this should be enough to make her able to fight like she could before. When she wakes up, Maria is happy that she feels better than before, but Sophia quickly warns her about Takumi. What Maria does is confirm that he is better than she thought, and with a mirror, she makes her see what her ear looks like now. Sophia is shocked to see this, and also realizes that she has regained her magic power. Maria tells her that Takumi cured her completely, so later that day, Sophia speaks to him alone. Takumi then explains that he needed one more level in his light magic skill in order to dispel the curse placed on her. The fluid in those bottles was extracted from the highly poisonous Nenem herbs he procured from Papek. He was using it to raise his level by repeatedly applying it to a wound and casting heal. He also just said Maria was cruel because she thought some medicinal herbs he organized were trash and threw them out. Sophia asks him why he did something so dangerous, and he reminds her that he said he would take care of it. After hearing him and seeing his smile, she inevitably falls to her knees and cries. She then says that she, Sophia Sylphid, hereby swears his lifelong loyalty to him, Takumi Iruma, so he offers her his hand, accepting that commitment. Nolan is able to see this, and after this, she focuses on other two people, saying that it's Mildgard, roughly 1 year later. Sometime later, Takumi one day decides to go to the library to study all the alchemy books he can find. There are only 4 books on alchemy in such a large library, which makes him wonder why the subject has died out so much when the way it works is so simple. That's when Takumi realizes that it's because it's based on the writing of an ancient magic civilization. Since he reincarnated into this world, Takumi is able to understand all of its languages, and that's likely due to Lady Nolan's blessing. When he goes back home, Maria can't stop talking about how lovely it was to see the two of them yesterday. Takumi quickly realizes she's talking about what happened between him and Sophia, and Maria confirms that she had a front row seat to the lovely scene. Seeing Sophia like that made her think that she was just like a knight vowing to protect a princess. Leaving that aside, the three of them focus on the toilet production, and they manage to fill the order. Takumi decides to take a break from mass-producing toilets, though he'll keep producing other things, but he's thinking of going on a journey whenever he feels like it. He wants to try finding materials and meals unique to certain places, see unique sights, explore some ruins, and have fun doing it, so he'll have Sophia accompanying him as his bodyguard. That's why he wants to ask Maria to hold down the fort while they're gone with Maple. A little hesitant, Maria asks him if she'd be a nuisance if she wanted to go with them too. After all, she can't imagine herself handling all the housework without him, Sophia, or Maple. Seeing her tears, Takumi thinks that he would be worried about leaving her alone in such a big mansion. That's why he decides to do the same he did with Sophia and checks Maria's stats, realizing that they're not bad at all, and she's a battle maid, capable of combat. Maria tells him that she's well aware of the danger, and Sophia also asks him to let her come with them, since she can teach her magic and how to fight. Takumi accepts the request, so now that that's settled, he decides to make weapons and armor for the two of them. Sophia mentions that she would like a longsword and a spear about 2.5 meters long, also a longbow for range, and 1 or 2 knives. Takumi is surprised to see her list the weapons without any hesitation, but he assumes it's expected from a warrior. He asks her if she needs a shield, and Sophia tells him that she'd like a buckler that isn't too bulky. On the other hand, Maria mentions that she was trained in short blades at the Mulan Trading Company, so basically any short sword or knife should be good enough. Sophia warns her that if that's all she'll have, then she'll be lacking in attack power against monsters, so she could teach her how to use a spear. Maria excitedly accepts, so Takumi spends the night creating ingots of magical steel for the weapons, because in this world, metal requires more than hardness, or there's no point in using it. In the meantime, Sophia takes care of training Maria in using a spear, teaching her all she knows. Once Takumi finally finishes the weapons, he ends up exhausted, but a lot of his skills level up. He added a wing pattern to the design of Sophia's spear, and a flame pattern to Maria's spear. He also casts the Enhance Attack and Auto Repair enchantments on them. And next comes Maria's short blades, though only imagining them on Maria's thighs is something that makes him really flustered. The next thing would be their armor. But the problem is that he needs to get their measurements, and it wouldn't do for him to ask to measure them. Luckily, he's prepared for this situation, so he uses magic to summon Sophia and Maria dolls. He made them with the help of Appraisal EX, though looking at them closely, he thinks it's a bit scandalous. Leaving that aside, he quickly gets to work and decides to use the huge armored boar's carapace and hide for materials. He then will add in cloth made from Maple's threads, so he has to come up with a design that's functional, though appearance is important for him too. With that in mind, Takumi lets his tastes run wild. And several days later, Sophia and Maria finally try on his creation. He cries for how good they look, and the girls are surprised that the armors are a perfect fit, not knowing what he did to achieve that. Sophia asks him how he managed to match their sizes so well, and just when the spider is about to expose him, Takumi quickly changes the subject and asks what they think about the weapons. The girls are really happy with the weapons as well, so Takumi gives her rings, saying that he figured they could serve well as focuses for casting magic, and they're imbued with mana. They're surprised that he went so far, since protruding these rings probably consumed a lot of mana. Takumi tells them that it was training for his production skills too, and thanks to that, he's obtained ice magic and lightning magic. After that, the three of them head to the Adventurers Guild, since Maria and Sophia need to be registered with the guild before going on a journey. Once the registration is done, the two girls start at the lowest rank, which is rank H, and the three of them also register together as a party. For now, Takumi decides to try taking rank H and G quests, since he's not exactly trying to raise his rank within the guild. Just then, a party of rank D adventurers approach them, trying to flirt with the girls, saying that they're much more reliable than Takumi. Before one of them can lay a finger on them, Takumi gets in the way, standing firm in front of the adventurer, though deep down he's terrified. However, he knows that Sophia and Maria are both his precious friends, so he has to do something. Takumi then tells him that he's rude and vulgar, and he's nothing like the three members of Lion Fang that he met before. The adventurer is furious to hear this, so he immediately launches a punch at him, but Takumi uses a physical enhancement skill, which protects him from the blow and hurts the adventurer's hand. Just then, Barak, the guildmaster, shows up, wanting to know what's going on. Hans explains that the D-rank adventurers picked a fight, so Takumi just stood there and got hit. Because of that, Barak asks Takumi to come with him, and when they're alone, he asks him what happened, clarifying that they protect personal information. Hans mentions that there were faint traces of mana, so he assumes that it was magic. Takumi is surprised, since if he can sense lingering traces, then his sense magic skill must be quite a high level. He then explains that he didn't cast any magic on those men. and he just pulled out some charcoal from his item box and coated his upper body in it, synthesizing it into diamond. Once everything's clarified, Hans notices how pretty Maria and Sophia are, so he tells the guildmaster that they should immediately promote him to rank D. Barak agrees with this, since if they do that, they'll see less adventurers trying to make a move on the girls. The three of them accept this invitation, so Hans quickly prepares 3 quests for them. A quest to exterminate goblins, a quest to exterminate kobolds, and a quest to gather Maril herbs. Sophia mentions that there's likely a medium-sized encampment nearby, and there might be a goblin general among them, which is a rank C monster. It's generally said to take at least 5 parties of rank D or higher to exterminate an encampment dominated by one of them. However, if they use her sprite magic, Takumi's elemental magic, and Maria's earth magic to launch area attacks at the start and thin out their numbers, then they have a strong chance of exterminating them on their own. Takumi doesn't seem too excited about the idea, but before he can say anything, Maple informs him that she's about to evolve, so he quickly gets her into his pocket dimension so she can rest. He tells the girls that they don't have Maple's backup anymore, so it's just the 3 of them now. As they move forward a little further, Sophia scans the area and informs them that there are about 300 to 400 goblins, and according to the wind spirits, there are no humans anywhere, so they can use magic. Right after, the 3 of them raise their fists to use their rings, which they combine with their offensive magic. Despite the destruction they caused, Sophia doesn't let her guard down, and she approaches the goblin general and a goblin knight to attack them. Takumi doesn't have a choice but to fight back as well, and he quickly levels up on several skills, using alchemy to defeat the goblin. Later that day, they go back to the guild and inform Hans that they've completed the quests in half a day. However, for some reason, Hans is kind of nervous, so he asks them to come to the back for a bit. Once they do that, they meet with the guildmaster again, and he's surprised by their accomplishments, since they did something that requires an extermination squad with multiple rank D or higher members. Before he can say anything else, a hand appears out of nowhere to push him out of the way, and we then see Maple, who already evolved. Maria is excited to see how cute she is, and she doesn't hesitate to hug her immediately, and Barak decides to give up and let them go. Hans then tells them that he'll prepare their rewards and informs Takumi that he's been promoted to rank E, and both Sophia and Maria are promoted to rank F. The next day, Maria asks Takumi for some fabric scraps so she can make underwear for herself and Sophia, and explains that she doesn't want to ask Maple for that because her fabric is too high quality for something like that. She then shows him a sketch of what the underwear would look like, but Takumi freaks out and draws her what it actually should look like, offering to create it himself. As soon as she sees this, Maria gets into a state of shock, but seconds later, she asks him to do it. Just then, Maple informs Takumi that Papek is here, though he finds him unconscious at the entrance. She clarifies that he just passed out when he saw her, so Takumi assumes that he didn't expect her evolution. Once he finally wakes up, Takumi finds out that he has come with a request from the Lord of Bolton, Marquis Godwin, who wants to meet him. He believes it's about the purification magic devices, and that reminds Takumi about him mentioning having a lead on some backing that would prevent interference from the Holy Empire of Cydonia. Papek confirms this and tells him that it's the Lord Marquis Godwin Bolton. When they visit him for negotiations, Godwin mentions the positive points that the artifact can generate for hygiene, which can also prevent epidemics. Thanks to that, he feels indebted to Takumi and thanks him for this. He also thanks them for what they did with the goblin encampment, something that the Knight Captain also appreciates very much. Lastly, Godwin tells him that he'd like him to put himself first from now on, since if something were to happen to him, it would be a great loss for the land of Bolton, as well as their entire kingdom. He must not let his guard down, especially once the Holy Empire of Cydonia starts coming for him. After that, once they're finally back home, Takumi feels mentally drained, so he decides to focus on the underwear he wanted to make for the girls. Once he finishes them, Sophia and Maria are seemingly concerned for him, since he was holed up in his workshop for 3 whole days making this underwear for some reason. Still, he looks like he's completely exhausted himself, but they think they're very pretty. Takumi tells them that he wants them to try them on, but the girls immediately get flustered, so he quickly takes his words back, realizing how bad it sounds. The 2 of them are willing to try them on for him, but Takumi panics and runs away, which makes them believe he's a coward. In the meantime, Takumi locks himself in his room, feeling like everything is going haywire, and maybe it's a sign that part of Lady Nolan's blessing is coming undone, though, truly, it has nothing to do with it.